Okay, so have you ever like been in one of those meetings? You know the kind, Ray, where there's that one person who just like has to dominate. They've got like an answer for everything and this aura. Well, not quite confidence, but almost like they need everyone to know they're the smartest person in the room. Well, today we're going deep, deep into dark personality traits. And just to be clear, we're not talking about like full-blown villains from a movie or anything. More like those little tendencies we all see, sometimes even in ourselves, that can make things interesting, let's just say. So what exactly are dark personality traits? Well, think of it this way. They're not like official diagnoses you'd find in a psychology textbook.
Yeah.
They're more like patterns of thought and behavior. And they can be pretty harmful, either to the person themselves or, the people around them. It all comes down to context and how strong those traits are. Like imagine a CEO who's a really fearlessly dominant. That might be what makes them a great leader, right? But too much. And then they just become a tyrant. And of course, we've all heard of the infamous dark triad, right? Narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy. Just the names sound intense. But even these aren't always so black and white. Take narcissism. We pictured, that stereotypical narcissist needing all the attention. Oh, I used to work with this guy. Honestly, he'd spend like hours in front of the mirror just fixing his hair. Unbelievable. But there's actually another type. The vulnerable narcissist. They're actually super insecure deep down, craving validation, but almost like they can't believe anyone could truly like them. Almost kind of sad, Now, Machiavellianism, that's different. The master manipulators, right? Like I had this friend, could talk themselves out of any situation. Looking back, maybe a touch of Machiavellianism there, always got what they wanted, even if it meant, stepping on a few toes along the way. What's fascinating is Machiavellians aren't always evil. They're just laser focused on goals and ethics, not always the top priority. It's like if lying works, it works. The ends justify the means, right? Then there's psychopathy, the one everyone thinks of. Really comes down to two things: fearless dominance and callousness. The first one is like extreme fearlessness, combined with this drive to, dominate, and callousness. Basically not a lot of empathy. Like they just don't experience emotions the same way most people do, which, can lead to some serious problems. But here's the catch: the dark side of personality. It's way bigger than just the triad. Researchers are finding all sorts of other tendencies just as fascinating and maybe even more relevant to our everyday lives. Like, have you ever heard of spitefulness? It's this weird thing where someone might actually harm themselves just to get back at someone else, like cutting off your nose to spite your face, taken to an extreme. I was reading this thing about nuns. Historically, some would actually mutilate themselves so they wouldn't be raped. I mean, that's an intense example, right? But it shows you how powerful these dark impulses can get. Then there's sensation seeking. This one's a bit of a double-edged sword. It's what pushes people to like explore, try new things, be adventurous. Great qualities. But if someone's really high on sensation seeking and they don't have good self-control, it can get risky. Substance abuse, reckless driving, all those things that give you that rush, but could also have some pretty bad consequences. I remember years ago at a party, this girl, I swear she had to be high on sensation seeking, decided to climb onto the roof, 3 stories up, everyone's freaking out, and she's just laughing. Needed to feel alive, she said. I mean, that kind of impulsivity, it's exciting, but it can also get you in a lot of trouble. Definitely a trait that needs, some careful handling. And then we have, of course, perfectionism. On the surface, it sounds good, right? Striving for excellence. But man, when it goes too far, things get dark. I had this boss once, the ultimate perfectionist. Every detail, absolutely perfect. If it wasn't, oh boy. He'd get so stressed, so angry, nobody could relax around him. Everyone was terrified of making even the smallest mistake. And the worst part, he was never satisfied. Even when we achieve incredible things, he'd find something to nitpick. It's like he couldn't even enjoy the success because he was so focused on those tiny flaws. So perfectionism, it can be rough.
Especially for those who have to work with or live with The perfectionist, right. Okay, so we've got all these dark traits: narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy, spitefulness, sensation-seeking, perfectionism. You might think this is all very psychology textbook stuff, but honestly, it's all around us. Think about it, your workplace, your family, your friends. You've encountered these traits, I guarantee it. And understanding them can be so helpful for navigating those relationships, for making sense of why people act the way they do. It's almost like, you've got this secret decoder ring for human behavior. And hey, it can even give you some insight into your own darker side, which, let's be honest, we've all got one. So next time you catch yourself being a little manipulative, or, you're feeling that need for attention, don't beat yourself up. We're all human. It's what makes us interesting, right? The key is to be aware of those tendencies, try to manage them, and use that self-awareness to become, well, the best version of ourselves. But we're just getting started. There's so much more to uncover when it comes to the dark side of personality.
And trust me, some of this stuff is truly mind-blowing. So stick with us as we dive even deeper. All right, so we've been talking about these dark personality traits, right? And it might seem like, well, they're all pretty negative. But here's the thing. What if they're not entirely dark after all? What I mean is, like, evolutionarily speaking, maybe there were some advantages to these traits. Think about it. Evolution kind of favors the traits that help us survive, pass on our genes, right? So it's possible that these seemingly negative traits actually serve some kind of purpose way back when, like back in the caveman days, right? Imagine, you're back then. A little bit of manipulativeness, maybe even a touch of narcissism that might have helped you, like, climb the social ladder, get more resources, attract a mate even, and fearless dominance. Well, that could have been essential for hunting dangerous animals, defending your territory. Back then, it really was survival of the fittest. So maybe these dark traits were actually, like, key to our ancestors' success. But of course, fast forward to today, and things are a little different, right? Too much Machiavellianism in the modern workplace. Yeah, that could seriously backfire. People see through that stuff pretty quickly. Your reputation could be, like, ruined. It's like that saying, what got you here won't get you there. The traits that might have been helpful back then might be so great in today's world, more complex now. But even today, there are still situations where these traits can, give someone an edge. Think about those high-pressure jobs, Wall Street, politics. There was this study I read actually found a connection between some aspects of psychopathy specifically, fearless dominance and success in those kinds of stressful careers. They just seem to thrive in that chaos. Obviously, it's not a guarantee. And there's always that risk, right, that those traits can lead to, well, ethical problems or even, criminal behavior. It's a fine line, that's for sure. So we've talked about the dark triad and how those traits might have been useful evolutionarily. But what about the others? Like spitefulness. I still can't quite wrap my head around that one. Why would anyone, intentionally harm themselves just to hurt someone else? Is all that part. And it seems counterintuitive. But if we're thinking about evolution, maybe it makes a little more sense. Remember, it's all about passing on those genes, right? So in some situations, even if you get hurt, but you take down a rival, that might actually increase your chances of survival or, reproductive success in the long run. It's brutal, but it's like, okay, if you eliminate your biggest competitor, even if you get injured in the process, you've got more resources, more potential mates. From an evolutionary standpoint, it's a cold calculation, but it could be effective. And then there's sensation seeking. We all have it to some degree, right? It's what makes us want to explore, try new things, push our limit, that thrill seeking part of us. But for some people, it's like their need for that stimulation is just way higher. They need more intense experiences to get the same rush. It's like they're wired differently. And that's why they might get into riskier behaviors, extreme sports, gambling, substance abuse, things like that. It's not that they're trying to be reckless. It's just that's how their brain works. It's seeking out those higher levels of stimulation, which is why self-control is so important. Yeah, right. Because without those breaks, sensation seeking can lead to some pretty bad outcomes. Mm-hmm. It's all about finding that balance, pushing your boundaries, but also staying safe. Now, perfectionism, We all know those people, the ones who just need everything to be just so. Obsessing over every little detail, being super critical of themselves and everyone else. And on the surface, it's like, oh, they just want excellence. But sometimes it goes deeper than that. Perfectionism can be driven by this deep-seated fear of failing or of being criticized. It's less about actual excellence and more about like avoiding feeling bad. And that's when the dark side comes out. When those high standards aren't met, things can go south pretty quickly. They beat themselves up for the tiniest mistakes. It can be really hard on the people around them. It's like they can't handle the idea of being anything less than perfect. And that creates tension, right? In relationships, at work, everywhere. I used to work with this guy. He was obsessed with getting every single detail perfect. It was exhausting, honestly. We could never just like finish a project and move on.
Yeah.
He always had to tweak something, redo something, obsess over the smallest things. It was like he couldn't let go of control. You know, the worst part, he was never satisfied. Even when we did incredible work, he found something to criticize. It's like he couldn't even enjoy the success because he was so focused on those tiny imperfections. And honestly, I think it made him less effective in the long run. Too caught up in the details, lost sight of the big picture. So yeah, perfectionism, it's a double-edged sword for sure. It can push people to achieve great things, but it can also be a source of so much stress for them and everyone around them. So we've gone through all these dark traits: narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy, spitefulness, sensation-seeking, perfectionism. And we've seen how they can pop up, sometimes in really unexpected ways. But the important thing to remember is it's not about labeling people like good or bad based on these traits. It's about understanding how complex we are as humans, recognizing that everyone has, a bit of darkness and a bit of light. And sometimes those darker parts of us can actually become our biggest strengths. It's all about how we manage them, how we channel them in a positive way. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy, all these other, dark traits. It's easy to start thinking like, whoa, is everyone around me secretly a manipulative, sensation-seeking, spiteful mastermind? But the truth is, it's way more nuanced than that. Remember, these things exist on a spectrum. It's not like you either are or aren't any of these things. And just because someone shows a few of these tendencies, it doesn't mean they're like a bad person or that they're going to go around ruining lives. It's about understanding those little differences, right? Recognizing that everyone, and yeah, I mean ourselves too, we've all got a bit of that darkness mixed in with the good stuff. But here's what's really cool. Once you start understanding these dark personality traits, it can actually help you a ton in your relationships, in your career, just in life overall. It's almost like you've got this secret advantage. You can read people better, figure out their motivations, maybe even predict how they'll act. And once you've got that knowledge, it's so much easier to deal with different types of people. Less stress, more success, right? Like, let's say you work with someone who's a total narcissist. Now, instead of getting annoyed by their constant need for attention or the way they always got to take credit, you can use that, actually. Figure out how to, give them a little ego boost, the validation they crave. And maybe even, steer them in that direction that benefits everyone. Or what if you've got that Machiavellian coworker? Always scheming, trying to get ahead. Well, instead of getting tangled up in their games, you can be smarter. Be careful what you tell them. Pick your battles. It's not about being paranoid or anything, just being aware of, the potential dangers. Protecting yourself. Forewarned is forearmed, right? And here's the best part. Even if someone has some pretty strong dark tendencies, it doesn't mean they're stuck that way forever. People can change, especially if they want it and they get the right support. There are therapies specifically designed to help people, manage their emotions better, develop empathy, build healthier relationships. And even if someone isn't actively trying to change, just understanding where they're coming from can make a huge difference. You can be more compassionate, more understanding, even when they're acting, difficult. It's like, instead of judging them, you try to see the world through their eyes, understand their struggles, maybe even connect with them on a deeper level. So the takeaway here is this: Don't be afraid to explore the dark side of personality. That's fascinating. And it can teach you so much about, well, yourself and everyone around you. By shining a light on these darker parts, we can create a more understanding world. A world where we can work with our differences, appreciate each other's strengths, and support each other on this crazy journey of, growth and self-discovery. And hey, next time you catch yourself feeling a little manipulative, or maybe you're craving a bit too much attention, give yourself a break. We've all been there. The important thing is to be aware of those tendencies, try to manage them, and use that knowledge to become, well, the best version of you. So that's our deep dive into the dark side of personality. I hope you found it interesting, thought-provoking, maybe even a little helpful. And until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay awesome.